Hello guys, my name is Abyaz Attaqee Shah Oktora, and this is the third video on my series of videos about the class that I'm currently attending, which is called Wireless Communications and Convergence Network. So this video will summarize the contents of the third week's lecture, which is titled NGN Broadcasting and Network Security. So let's go straight to my summarization of it. So, as the title suggests, this lecture is mainly talking about broadcasting and network security in NGN. In my last video, we already know that convergences is a normal thing in NGN, in which last video I talked about many different services converged into a single network, so that that single network is responsible for all those different services. So, well, the first part that I'm going to talk about is NGN convergence for broadcast. So, broadcasting convergence into IP-based networks. So what this means is that the many different broadcasting services are converged into an IP-based network, which is the main backbone for NGN. So there are three main side effects of implementing this: the digitalization of content, the convergence of broadcasting and telecommunication sectors, and the delivery of high-quality audiovisual content. So the first one, the digitalization of content, which basically means that most content that we usually consume from the television or from the radio or newspaper, now we can also consume from the internet. So there are many things that can help support this, that can help make this effect more prevalent. The first one is having IP-based network. The second is the availability of high-speed broadband, high-speed internet. And the third is the availability of multimedia devices. And the last one is high-speed mobile networks. The second is the convergence of broadcasting and telecommunication sectors. Usually in the old days, broadcasting sector and telecommunication sectors are quite similar, but they are different. They are significantly segregated, so they are like in different sectors. But now, because of this, they are being converged. And the third is the delivery of high quality audiovisual content. The first example that I can think of is, I guess, YouTube, transforming users from passive to active watchers. There's also like a feature in YouTube where you can live stream, so that watchers can interact while the content creators are live. So as they are live streaming, they can interact with their viewers. So now what has changed? So what has changed from the past to the present? So first, digital broadcasting enables a more efficient use of spectrum. Second, enabling a new audiovisual content provider. Third, content provider can offer services directly to all markets without gatekeepers. Fourth, government instruments to control broadcasting content are challenged by the new multi-platform. And five, broadcasting not only becomes more competitive, a more competitive market, but also a more international market. So now we are going to talk convergence in content. So there are 6 main points here: scope of regulation, ensuring effective competition, spectrum allocation, public interest objectives for content, advertising, and mass carry regulations. So for the scope of regulation, what this means is that there are still contents that are already converged and contents that have not been converged. So the scope of this regulation is very important to ensure that the regulation only applies to those that the regulation makers actually meant. So scope definitions of broadcasting services, and it needs to address a number of social and economic interests, for example, plurality, cultural diversity, national identity, and a standard of decency. And for example, for convergence in content, for the scope of regulation is European Union differentiated television broadcasting system, in which they have a scheduled and non-scheduled regulation. So the second is ensuring effective competition, in which we need to make sure that there is equal access to content to provide competitive offers. So development of the appropriate technologies and services on the digital dividend spectrum, and government can start by educating consumers properly, reducing switching costs, and simplifying bureaucracy for new players. The third is spectrum allocation. I explained about this briefly in my last episode. It's basically a way so that spectrum allocation will be more flexible. So significant amount of spectrum bandwidth will be available in this is called like digital dividend, which is also stated 4.2 here, and new entrants capability to create alternative access infrastructures and deliver directly their services to users. So this allows new entrants, as this says, to make their own access infrastructures, access routes, so that they can deliver without having to rely on others' infrastructures. Fourth is public interest objectives for content, in which we need to consider the changes in the supply of information and programming. And by applying this, we can give more choice, and the customer can control the time of consumption for content. So like for YouTube, we don't need to watch like a scheduled for it. We can just choose whenever we want to watch it. So, and it is also a move from institutional supervision to system-based supervision, in which it's not supervised by an institution, by like an organization, but it's supervised by the system itself. Okay, so the fifth one is advertising. So there was usually time frames and quotas for traditional broadcasting. So for example, for like in television, so if you watch television and you're watching the news and then suddenly it just switches to an ad, that is basically the quota for the advertisement itself. But for NGN, it doesn't apply like that, because the advertisement can easily be skipped. For example, like in YouTube, for like if the ad is, if I remember, it's shorter than 15 seconds, you can skip it after 5 seconds. But there are also special cases in which it doesn't let you skip, because I think they have like a tiered system, in which if the advertiser is paying enough money, they can ensure that the ad is unskippable, but they need to keep it either below 10 seconds. I don't really remember, but it just shows the difference between the traditional broadcasting and the NGN broadcasting. And the last is 6, which is must carry regulation, in which it gives obligation for the broadcaster to carry public service channels. So now we are going to talk about the institutional environment. There has traditionally been a distinction between broadcast regulators and telecommunication regulators. Minimizing the number of regulators that an enterprise needs to deal with is also important in order to minimize regulatory costs and reduce the potential for uncertainty and inconsistency. Regulators in broadcasting and telecommunication have had an important role in regulating dominant market positions. Convergence driven by NGN is clearly increasing the need for better horizontal coordination in regulation of the communication sector. So now we are just going to jump straight to security, the second part of this lecture. Security in converged NGN. So security is always important whenever it's in a network or not. So it is an important aspect in NGN, since IP networks are very prone from attacks, with attacks from internet or from email, from malicious programs. So traditional circuit switches are usually designed as closed protocols, in which users have a lesser amount of info on its structure and functioning. So contrary to this, NGN is IP based, developed by open protocols. So what this means is that circuit switches don't really store info on the structure and the functioning because they are physical objects, they are switches. But but the NGN is different because they are using IP based, which means it is an open program, which means it actually stores a bit of info on its structure and its functioning, making that we need to keep the IP based program secure. Security is always essential for the industry to be reliable and competitive in the global market. A down network could have severe repercussions to the national economy. So, social dimensions of security. So, consumers are becoming dependent on information systems. NGN should provide a reliable connection anytime, anywhere. So, what this means is that NGN needs to be able to give the I guess give the users the belief that whenever they need it, anywhere they need it, they will have a reliable connection and they will not be in jeopardized by network errors. Security threats affecting the converged infrastructure can arise from anywhere because of the borderless nature of IP networks of the internet, and ensuring an appropriate balance between civil liberties and security solutions, for example, between anonymity and freedom of expression. For example, anonymity and freedom of expression, and collaboration between international standard organization, for ITU, ETSI, ISO, IATF, and 3GPP. So now we are going to I guess a side point. So these are the 5 possible threats that a network could possibly face. They are introduced in ITU resolution X.805. So I'm gonna just briefly talk about this. So destruction, the first possible threat, destruction of information and or network. Corruption, unauthorized tampering with an asset. Removal, theft, removal, or loss of information and or other resources. Disclosure, unauthorized access to an asset. And interruption, network becomes unavailable or unusable. These are the 5 possible threats that could possibly affect, or in most cases destroy, the network. Now we are going to go talk about the common security issues in NGN. So, threats and risks in voice over internet protocol. So I'm gonna give some examples here. So eavesdropping, loss, alteration or deletion of content, caller ID location not identified in a time of emergency, lack of capacity for system management, DOS attack, viruses and malwares, and power failure. So identity theft and DOS can impact the revenue for NGN because they linked straight to the user's trust for the network itself. So the ITU recommendation is that there needs to be 3 security layers. First on the infrastructure, second on the service, and the last is on the application. So that is it for my third video here. Third video. So thank you guys for watching, and I'm sorry if I made any mistakes, and see you in the next video.